Good morning, Grove. Thanks for being here in the middle of summer. I'm Byron, and as we continue our summer book series, I wanted to invite up a very special guest all the way from Chandler, Gilbert, Arizona, Pastor Josh Havens. You can give him a big round of applause. And we're continuing our series today on the summer book series, and we're going to be diving into the topic of dreams and dreaming big and achieving our dreams. So as I was thinking about dreams and dreaming big and writing this sermon, I was thinking about all the people that I've seen accomplish dreams and the very successful dreamers that I've met. And I get to work with a very successful dreamer. He's always touring the world and writing #1 hits on the Christian charts. And I was thinking, we need to have Josh on stage to talk about his dreams and how he accomplishes his dreams, because we have somebody that can tell us how to accomplish dreams. And some of you don't know, but his family, his siblings, are all incredibly successful. They're in unique careers. And so I wanted Josh just to share about that for a couple of minutes. And Josh, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah. So the first question that I had for you, Josh, was growing up. You know, you have had a successful career in the Christian music space, and your siblings. Tell us about your siblings as well. Where did that come from? How did that all come to be?
Yeah, you know, we have a big family. There's 6 of us kids, and my mom and dad, they were always our biggest support and encouragement. My mom said that when she was a kid, she never felt like she had someone who believed in her potential. And so because of that, when she had kids, she went out of her way to make sure that she just poured into their dreams, into their talents. And I think it really shows with the kids. And she said, I was good at things, but I never was given a chance to really learn to be better at those things or to craft those things. And so when me and my siblings started showing interest in things, my parents would support it. So like my oldest sister, Jennifer, she saw Indiana Jones when she was little. You know, the new Indiana Jones movie came out, and she saw the original one way back, and she said, I want to be Indiana Jones. I mean, who wouldn't?
With the hat.
Right? Who wouldn't? Yeah, with that. So she bought a hat, and she started excavating our yard in Garland, Texas. But my parents really encouraged her and said, you know what? You can be Indiana Jones. You can be a great archaeologist. And so she ended up going to university for archaeology, graduated, taught at the University of Tel Aviv, taught archaeology there for a season. And now she still lives in Israel, married an Israeli, and is doing archaeology and has a ministry there to reach out to people in that community. But that was her dream, and it came true. It came true.
Incredible.
And then
That's just one of his siblings.
and then I have another sister, Esther, who started taking pictures around the house when she was in high school and just kind of took an interest in it. And my parents really encouraged her and said, you can be the greatest photographer on planet Earth. And she started really diving into it, and they supported it. And she has now done work with organizations like Compassion, Food for the Hungry, Africa New Life. She's been published in National Geographic, which was one of her big dreams. And so she has traveled the world. She actually was just in Rwanda with her newborn. She has a baby that was born 6 months ago and already has like 10 stamps in his passport. Her passport's already full. But, you know, it was that encouragement that allowed my sister to pursue her dreams. And then, you know, I have a brother who lives in the Netherlands. He's a singer-songwriter, super talented. And with my own dreams when I was a kid, my parents never squashed them. So no matter how ridiculous they seemed, they would say, well, you can be that. I remember being a little kid and telling my parents, I want to be the president of the United States of America.
There's still time.
I don't know what I was thinking. Byron said he'd vote for me. But for a season, I wanted that. And they said, well, you can be. And I remember they even made little pins that said Havens for president, like awesome. As I was a little kid. But thankfully, my political career ended. You know, it didn't last very long. But then I wanted to be things like a baseball player, right? Professional baseball player. So we did the baseball thing. Then I wanted to be, with the Olympics were on, this Winter Olympics, and I wanted to be a professional Olympic ice skater. So they got me ice skates, and we went skating, and I wasn't very good at it. So I didn't do that. But then I started piano lessons, and that was where I really blossomed. I found my thing, my spark, the thing that I felt like God had gifted me with. And so my mom, God bless her, she would take us around to all of our different things throughout the week, all of our commitments, piano lessons. I was in boys choir, all the different, and it was multiple times a week for each of them. And she would just cart us around like the Havens family taxi, you know. And I'm so grateful for that, because if she hadn't believed in us and taken us around all those things, then, you know, I might not be doing what I'm doing. But she always said, you can, whatever your dream is, you can get there. And so because of that, we believed in ourselves.
That's awesome. And as we grow up, right, we have all these dreams to be president or an ice skater. But what happens, I think, a lot of times is we grow up, maybe you're a teenager or you get a job, and then you feel like, this is so unrealistic. I'm not going to make the Olympics. Did you ever have that when you started playing music? Did that ever hit you in your college years where you were like, I'm discouraged, I'm going to give up, I'm going to stop writing these songs, this isn't for me?
Absolutely. But I think because our parents were so encouraging, it kind of kept our eyes on the goal. And so when things were discouraging, I remember my dad, I had a piano recital, and I just spaced, complete blank. I don't know if you've ever experienced that before, but it's just gone. And I start into the piano piece, and I can't remember anything about how it goes. And I just embarrassed myself in front of a big group of people and my peers, and it was horrible. And maybe that could have been the end of my piano career right there. But afterwards, my dad said, no, you're gonna dust it off, you're gonna get back up, and you're gonna nail it next time. And I did. And it was that encouragement to keep going. So not every song you put out is gonna be a number one. And when they don't hit, when it's not working out, you gotta keep your eyes on what the goal is and remember, okay, that's what I'm shooting for. This is just a bump in the road. You know, there's been times when we played shows and 100 people show up instead of 1,000. And, you know, you don't give up, but you brush it off and you say, okay, no, I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to grow from this. And then what I find in my own life is so many times the things that were the hardest, when I could have packed up and given up and said, I'm going to do something else, powering through those things and learning and growing from them is how I made it to the most beautiful things and to the victories and the celebrations. And I would have never got there if I had just given up. But it was my parents really encouraging that drive and saying, no, don't give up when it's hard, but push through.
So cool. And I think it's so true. When we were talking about this week and your dreams, you were saying about how your parents and your mom encouraged the dream, but you were also saying something pretty unique about your mom and something she did with dreams.
Yeah, so she would write them down, which I think is a great practice, and I wish I had done that more when I was younger, because I'd be curious what it said now. But she would write her dreams down, and she'd put them in the back of her Bible, and then she would pray over them. And so there was a season we went through. My mom found a Bible a few years back, and it was a Bible from over 20 years ago from a really hard season in our family. It was a time when my dad had just lost his job. We thought we were going to lose our home and our car. My brother was in the midst of a really bad meth addiction. It was a hard time for our family. My mom was driving this old beater car that broke down all the time. And so she would write these dreams down and just pray for God to bring these to pass. And so she found this Bible and was going through the dreams. And she was very specific. So it said things like, I pray that my son would be clean, that he would beat this addiction that he has. I pray that someday I would live in a home in the mountains, surrounded by pine trees, with a mountain view. I mean, she was very specific. And then she said, I pray that I would have a car that doesn't break down on me all the time. She said, I pray that I would have 2 dogs. For some reason, she wrote down 2 dogs.
Not 3.
Not 3 dogs, 2 dogs. And she said, I pray that God would provide, so that I don't have to worry every month that we're going to lose our house or that we're going to, lose the things that are important to us. And so she's going through, and she said, God answered every one of these prayers. All these dreams have come true. So my mom now lives in Flagstaff, Arizona, in a beautiful little cabin that's in the woods. And when she moved in, the pines were so thick that she couldn't see any mountains. So she was like, well, this is pretty good. God, this is pretty close. Well, the next year, the Forest Service had to do trimming for fire prevention, and they trimmed enough trees to where now she has a mountain view.
Incredible.
Yeah. So she has a car that won't break down, a reliable car. She has, my brother, he did conquer his addiction, and he is clean. He's been clean now for
Look at that.
over 15 years. Yeah. And the dogs, 2 dogs is so random, but she actually went to a no-kill shelter, and there was this adorable dog that was just, she was connected. But the dog had a brother. So she was like, I can't take him away from his brother. So she has 2 dogs. Yeah.
Look at that.
Both dogs. But it was cool to see that God really did answer all those prayers, and those dreams came true. And if she hadn't written it down, she might not have remembered all that.
She was able to go step by step to the 2 dogs. I think that's so awesome. As we go into this morning and talk about our dreams, as someone who you have set dreams for yourself, and really over and over again, I think you do set these dreams and you've accomplished them. What would you say to somebody who's just starting out on a dream or in the middle of maybe trying to accomplish a dream? What would you say is your big piece of advice?
Well, the best dream you could have for your life is the dream that God has for your life. And so I would be in prayer. I think it's important to be in prayer, be close to the heart of God so that you understand what he wants from us. If God's calling me to be a billionaire, well, I'd wonder why. And God, understand why God's calling you to do what you're doing. Because some of our dreams are self-serving. Some of them we can use for the kingdom. And then dreams are a lot of hard work. It's easy to have a dream and have these goals, these things that we want. But if we want them to come to pass, we got to do our part too. So pray God's favor over what your dream is, but then do the hard work. If I want to be the best quarterback in the NFL, but I also love to sleep in every day, and I don't like, working out and practicing, I'm probably not going to be Tom Brady, But Tom Brady, he was getting up before everybody else and working when everybody else was taking off, and he was practicing when his teammates were sleeping, and that's how you achieve those things. So what you don't want to have happen is God opens the door for your dream, and our laziness got in the way, and we didn't put in the hard work, and so we're not prepared for when that door opens. So I would say do the hard work. I always tell my kids, if I had come home from school every day when I was in high school and just played video games until I went to sleep, I wouldn't know how to play guitar, and I wouldn't be doing music for my job today. And so I'm so thankful that my parents put limits on that and that I was encouraged to do the hard work. So it takes a lot of hard work, but there's no dream that's impossible.
Love that. Well, hey, thank you, Josh.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I think that what we see in Josh's life is somebody who was set up to dream, somebody who has been dreaming his whole life, and it was because his parents really fostered that creativity. They fostered somebody's potential, and they said, do you want to be an archaeologist? You can do it, right? And a lot of times what happens with our kids is, and now I have a toddler, we see them, and maybe they want to say, I want to be an Olympian, and we go, let's pick something a little bit more practical. Maybe I'm going to tell my daughter that, but I shouldn't, right? Because that's our natural instinct. Like, well, it's not realistic, it's not high pain, I don't know if you're gonna do it, but that's our natural inclination, is to not let them dream and not let them expand on it or not let them pursue it because we just see so many people around us fail. But what if we started to change the narrative? What if we just started to say, you can pursue it, you should pursue it, and you're absolutely not gonna fail. In Josh's family, failure wasn't even an option. He didn't think he could fail as a musician, and I think that's so cool. We're gonna be going through this book. It's called Dream Big for the people online. There you go, Dream Big. It's in the coffee shop. It's by Bob Goff. I got to meet Bob when he was here. He's a speaker. He is an eccentric individual. He's one of the most amazing people you'll meet. He's written bestsellers like Love Does, Everybody Always. If you say I'm not a reader, change your mind and read a book because it will change your life. Read a bunch of books. And so this book, Dream Big, is about how to achieve your dreams, how to make your dreams happen, how to start dreaming. This book came out during COVID, and for me, this was just a paradigm-shifting moment because for me, I saw this and I saw, wow, I am going to start dreaming big in my life. I was at the gym a few weeks ago, and it's one of those days where you're there, but you're just like, I don't want to be here. And the trainer, one of the guys, Jeff, he's a big guy. He's like, Byron, what are your goals? It's like, I don't know. I think I want to do 50 pull-ups in a row. And he said, Byron, you can do it, but you are your own worst enemy. I was like, that's true, Jeff. And I get in the way a lot because I am going to drink a Mountain Dew when I shouldn't, and I'm not going to show up, 4 or 5 days a week, and I probably should. And so I am my own worst enemy. And I think what happens a lot of times is we can self-sabotage. Maybe it's a small thing like with a goal or with a gym, but also as we relate it to dreams this morning, we can stand in the way. We can get in the way. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pull some lessons out from Bob Goff's book. And I'm going to tie in Joseph from the Bible because Joseph was a dreamer. And we're going to look at how Joseph dreamt big. We're not going to look at Joseph from the Old Testament, but Joseph from the New Testament. And Joseph from the New Testament, he's Jesus' earthly dad, isn't he? And so this is going to be like Christmas in July. It's going to be a little bit of a refresher for all of us. And so we're going to go through Matthew chapter 2. And in Matthew 2, what we see is that Joseph has these 4 very specific dreams. And these dreams are consecutive. And the angels, they keep coming to Joseph. So we're going to dive into Matthew 2, verse 13. And this is where Joseph is getting his 3rd dream from an angel. And it says this: after they were gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, "Get up, take the child to his mother, flee Egypt, and stay there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and escaped to Egypt. He stayed there until Herod's death, so that what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet might be fulfilled. Out of Egypt I call my son. Skip down to verse 19. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, because those who intended to kill the child are dead." So he got up, took the child and his mother, and entered the land of Israel. So we see Joseph, these are dreams number 3 and 4, and he gets these dreams from the angel. And Joseph is a great example of what it means to be a dreamer, because what does he do? He doesn't just stand there and go, these angels are crazy, man. Like, you guys are nuts. Like, none of this is going to happen. Or he doesn't actually, I think another thing that he could have thought is like, am I crazy? Like, am I seeing all these angels? Should I really do all this? I don't know if that's smart. But what does he do? He takes action. He takes a step and he starts moving into the destiny that God is calling his family. If he doesn't, he's not fulfilling prophecy. One of the lessons that we're going to pull out of the book today is that dreamers execute the dream. Dreamers take action and step into the dream that God has called you. Maybe God has put a dream inside of you, and you know what it is. Maybe your whole life you've had this dream, and you've just your whole life kind of been like, I don't know. It's a good idea, but I don't know if I should do it. Bob Goff has this quote in one of his chapters. He's talking about the difference between a daydreamer and a real dreamer. And he says this, he says, the minute between planning and taking action is the difference between daydreamers and real dreamers. See, you can have a dream your whole life. You can have this awesome idea your entire life. But the problem is it can stay a daydream. And until you actually take action on it and execute it, you might stay a daydreamer your whole life. You want to be an Olympian. You want to be an architect. You want to be an excavator and be Indiana Jones, which are all awesome ideas, and you should. But they might stay a daydream your whole life until you cross over that 1 minute and take action on the dream and start executing and saying, all right, I'm going to do this. Today is start day, and I'm going to start taking action. I'm going to move out like Joseph did, and it's a little bit scary, and I'm going to fail along the way, but I'm going to take action. One of the places I've seen this is in my grandparents' life. My grandparents started African Bible colleges, and they first started in Liberia, and they were in Liberia out in the jungle, and the first college, it got taken over by rebel soldiers and burned to the ground. So they were like, we have to start over. So they started looking for a new country to build in, and they ended up in Malawi, East Africa. Some of you just got back from a Malawi missions trip. And so I was on the phone with my grandmother this week asking her about the full story, and she said, we were in Malawi, and we were meeting with some government officials, we're meeting with some members of parliament, and we were touring the country looking for property. She said, but then the trip kind of took a turn because the government officials said that they weren't accepting any new missions organizations. They said that we couldn't come into the country because the country was closed, and we couldn't actually open a new college at the time, and they didn't know how many years it would be until they would allow any new Christian mission organizations into the country. And so she said we were sitting there, and we were just like, oh my gosh, why would God seemingly open a door and then shut a door right as it was seemingly supposed to happen? So she said what happened is they started to get on a plane. They were flying back to Mississippi, and they were just really discouraged. They had to write to all their supporters at all the local churches. They were supposed to write to their board of directors and to their staff and to the teachers because everyone was wondering, what's happening? Is there going to be another college? And she said they were just discouraged. They didn't know what to do. And at the time, my Uncle Paul, who's passed this last year, he was home, but he had also been on the trip, and he had visited Malawi with them. He'd seen the country. He saw where they wanted to build. And he had flown back to his college. He was just a college student. And he's in his dorm room, and he apparently wrote them a letter, something I don't think I've ever done. And he put a stamp on it. I don't know where I would go do this, but he wrote them a letter, and he mails it to them. And my grandmother, she said she opened it up, and she started reading it. And it said, Mom, Dad, where is your faith? And if you know them, they lived by this motto, faith in action, God in motion. And their whole life has been this. If you put your faith into action, God will go in motion, whatever it is. If you put your faith in action in your life, God will come alongside you and start to work. And so she said that they read that, and they were having all these doubts. They were discouraged, and they were like, our college son is telling us to have faith. We should probably start doing something about it. And so that was my uncle. His whole life was do something. That was what he lived by. He would see a need and he would fill it. When we moved to Malawi, we didn't have a school to go to. So he built an academy for his nieces and nephews. There was a hospital not there. So he built a hospital and a clinic and a maternity ward for people from the local villages to go to. He saw all these needs. He built 77 buildings in his life because he said, look, there's a need here. Let's do something and not sit around and daydream all day about it, but let's take action. That was his whole life. He saw that a STEM school, the first one in the country, wasn't there. So he said, let's take some action here and build a STEM school. I love how some of you have come around alongside that. I was meeting with the Alexander family, Sam and Melanie, and they said that they're helping make that dream a reality. So it's going to happen. Some of you engineers have come alongside that. Daydreamers can stay daydreamers and say, I have an idea. I want to start a hospital. I want to build a school, but I don't think the government will let me. I don't think I'm allowed to. And Bob talks about this in his book. He says what happens is when we get these ideas, all of a sudden we have roadblocks. And maybe you've experienced this. You have some roadblocks and obstacles that come up. And my daughter, she's 2. She's a little toddler, and she's been watching the same movie over and over again for like the last month. So I've seen Monster Inc. She says Monster Bink. So we've watched Monster Bink like 2,000 times. So I'm going to call them the 3 monsters that get in your path. And these are the 3 monsters that will really hold you back. The first monster Bink is this: planning and over-planning. What we do is we see a dream. We go, I think this is what I'm supposed to do. And then we just start planning and planning it out and planning it out and over-planning. This is Byron. And all of a sudden, we've been planning for 10 years on how we're going to go back to get a degree. And you have all the plans, you have all the transcripts, but you've never done anything. Number 2 is procrastination. This is the second monster Bink that stands in your way. And a lot of us in the room can procrastinate pretty well. You're like, I'll do it later. And then later never comes. And we've been procrastinating since high school and college. But when we procrastinate on a dream, it stays a daydream our entire life, doesn't it? The third one is this: people, the wrong ones. And when we have the wrong people in our life, the wrong toxic people, the wrong neighbors, whoever it is, right? The wrong people in a small group, or if you're in a relationship, or a friend that you shouldn't have around, they can just speak negativity and be complaining and saying, I don't think you're financially ready to do that dream. Or if you say something that you want to do, they're just saying, no, you can't. You shouldn't leave your job to do that. And maybe you need to leave your job to be able to do it. But these 3 monster Binks will always be holding you back. I was looking at this list this week in the book, and I don't know if there's something that you identify with. I identify with the planning and over planning. I could just sit here and plan for days. And we were doing one of those tests that you do to see what your personality is with our staff a couple years ago. So we're sitting there doing it, and I hated my results. I was like, this is not who I am. Like, they don't know me. And I looked at Paul Gunther, who's on staff, and I said, Paul, I think I'm like really a spontaneous person. And he's like, no, you're not. You're not spontaneous. He's like, you could think you're spontaneous, but you're not. And I'm like, dude, I am. This test is terrible. I think it's for high school kids. And so I'm like walking back to my office, and he's like, yeah. Hey, anyway, you want to go see a movie? I'm like, a movie right now? We got to work. I got to go. And he's like, see, you are not a spontaneous guy. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not, because if you're like me, some of you in the room, you're like, you could plan out every detail. I could plan out the next 6 months of your life down to the minute if you wanted me to. But when I read this in the book, it's interesting because this is an obstacle. Like, this is not a great quality. It's a good quality in some ways. But what happens is we end up planning and over planning, and it can hold you back from actually saying, and he says in the book, having a start day, saying, I'm going to have a start day to my dream. And if you plan too much or procrastinate too much, or you have these wrong people holding you back, then you're never going to have that start day to actually go and do the thing that God is telling you to do. These people are going to hold you back, and you're never going to have the freedom to go accomplish your dreams. I was thinking about this idea, and I was thinking about how we actually accomplish the dream. And Bob says in his book, he says, sometimes the dream is just ambiguous. Sometimes you don't know what the dream is. You just want to be successful. Or like Josh said, you want to have $1 billion, which is an idea, and that's a dream, but get specific with it, right? You don't know what it is, and maybe God does want you to. But you have to get specific with it and ask God. So Bob says in his book, he says this, the second lesson, you have to identify the ambition. You have to get really specific with it. Because if you're always wondering what your dream is, or if you've had this idea, I want to be successful, or I want to open a business, but you really don't know what it is, you have to start putting a name on it. Put a vision statement. Say, my dream is, and then fill in the blank. Say, I'm going to do this, and then write a couple more sentences underneath it that describe what that dream is, and say, this is what I'm specifically going to do. The best example I've seen of this in my life the past 20 years is Paul and Melinda Gunther. He was our youth pastor, and he opened up the Oasis Project, and they moved downtown Chandler, him and his wife and his family, and they've been opening up the Oasis property. They're going to start building on it soon. One of the Chandler police officers, he's a big SWAT guy, Arnold, who does security, was talking to him, and he introduced me, and so we're chatting with him, and the police officer, he said, what's the Oasis? Like, I always see it, I drive by, that's my territory, but what is it? And I said, I was about to say something, and then Mr. Bo, who is always here, Mr. Bo jumped in, and he said, the Oasis is going to be a community center for kids in the neighborhood that can help them learn trades. It's going to be for families to throw parties. It's going to be a safe place for kids in the neighborhood. And it's going to be a beacon of light for Jesus Christ in the neighborhood. And I was like, wow, that's really specific. I think that's it, and I think that's really good. And I think that describes the Oasis and what it's going to be. And Paul and Melinda have done an amazing job at saying this is what the Oasis is. And they've gotten really specific so that people who are supporting them and walking alongside them can say, yeah, this is what the Oasis is. This is how we're going to do it. And these are the things that we want to accomplish. See, when you can get really specific with your dream and you can say, I want to do this, but I also want to do this, then people understand what your dream is. I think a lot of times what we say is we go, I like basketball, but I like YouTube, so I'm just going to make a vlog about basketball and how to watch it. And you're like, I don't know if that's a dream. Or I like painting and cooking and YouTube as well. And I'm going to do a podcast about painting and cooking together, which is kind of specific, but you have to really narrow in on it and write out specifically what you're going to do. This is why it's important. Maybe say something in your dream, like my dream is to open up a food truck and cook for people in downtown Phoenix on Jefferson and Washington. I don't think those intersect, but somewhere over there. And we're going to sell churros, and 10% of the proceeds are going to go to women who have experienced severe trauma. Something to that effect. Whatever your passion is, whatever your God-given desire is that God has laid on your heart, write that out. Put a vision statement to it and say, this is what my dream is, and this is how I'm going to get there. Because once people see, like, oh, this is her dream, they're going to start going, hey, you said churros, you said food truck, it's time to go. They're not going to let you stay there any longer. People will get behind you and start supporting you once they see what your dream is. I took a bunch of our students on summer camp about 2 weeks ago. And so we went to Compton, California. We're in the Watts neighborhood. And there was a missions trip aspect to it. So there was a service day, and we're painting houses. And we were getting to know people in the community. A few of the young guys that we got to know were interns living at the church. And so we got to meet these guys. And while the kids are painting, an ice cream truck came by. So we lost all of our workers. And they're sitting on the curb jamming ice cream. And so we were talking to some of the interns, the young guys that are working at the church and living there. And they're talking to us, and one of the guys named Jose. Jose is talking to me and a few of our volunteers. And he starts telling us his life story. He said, I grew up right here in these projects, right there. He said, the gangs have been impacting my life ever since I was a baby, since I was a toddler. He said, Tyler, standing right here, Tyler, you shouldn't be wearing a purple Diamondbacks hat. He didn't even know the Diamondbacks. So you should take it off because of the Grape Street Crips. And we were like, what? He said, look, I've used humor my whole life to not be jumped into the gang. And we're just blown away at his testimony and the things he's saying. He said, actually, and most recently, my brother got out of prison. He's in one of the gangs. He got out of prison. He's living at home with us. And nobody's working. It's a really toxic environment in my home. And I'm the only one that's supporting everybody and paying rent. And I'm just sick of it. I was sick of supporting the whole family. I was sick of paying rent. And so I told them, I said, look, I love you guys, but I'm moving out. I have a better dream for my life, and it's not here in the projects with you. So he moved down the street. He moved into the church with Pastor Todd, and he works for Pastor Todd now. I think a really good dream that is specific enough is Jose's dream of a life outside of the projects and a better dream with Jesus outside of the gang violence. I think that's specific enough, isn't it? And what Jose did is he left the toxic environment inside of his house. He tried to leave the projects, and he moved out of it. He said, I'm not staying anymore. I can't support you guys. You're too much for me. You're not letting me be where I want to be, and he left. One of the lessons that we see in the book is that dreamers don't stay. Dreamers move on. If you have something that's holding you back from your dream, you can't stay in the past. Bob Goff says in the book, dreamers do not stay. Jose is a phenomenal example of this. He says, I have a dream for a better life, not in the projects, so I'm not going to stay here anymore. And one day I'll make another move, but I can't stay here right now. When we look at this in the Bible, we see Joseph, and it's after Herod's death. It's in this fourth dream. They're living in Egypt. Herod dies, and what does the angel say? Hey, enough time has passed. Everybody else who hates you is dead, so why don't you come back? You need to come back to Israel now. And it says in verse 21, so he got up, took the child and his mother, and entered the land of Israel. I love Joseph's response here. Joseph, I think, I saw this on Instagram yesterday, and it's like, if you could go back in time and watch any Bible story, what would it be? I don't know what I would pick. I thought about that. But if we could watch Joseph's response and just sit there, what would Joseph do? If you're in front of an angel, would you be like, like, can I pray about it for like 3 weeks? Because these Egyptian cotton sheets are really nice. And the boating on the Nile, it's sick. And like, I'm just, like, Mary already learned the language, and Jesus knows Egyptian now, and I don't know. Do we have to go, or could you come back like on the 21st and we have a meeting about this? But he doesn't do that, does he? It just says he left, and he knew that he was supposed to go back to Israel, and he obeyed the angel, and he fulfilled prophecy. Like, theologically, he could have gone in a different direction. But he fulfills prophecy, and he leaves. I think a lot of times what we love to do is we like to think about it too much. And if you're like me, you have to plan it out, and then we end up procrastinating, and we don't move in. But we have to, because if we're not going to move out, then we'll stay where God doesn't want us to stay too long. But we have to be willing to step out into the fearful thing, into the faith-filled thing that God has planned for you. Bob, in his book, tells a story where he was feeling like God had bigger plans for him to write books and to go speak nationally. But he has a big law firm. And so he said on a Thursday, he quit his law firm and he quit practicing law. And he actually says that on every following Thursday, if you read his books, he tells this story over and over. He says, I started quitting things, small things and big things. And he encourages readers. He says, for you, quit something on a Thursday. It's not the principle of being a quitter. It's not that you're going to be a quitter. But he says there's certain things. You don't have to think too hard about it. You should be able to think and go, I know the thing that I need to quit. There's something in my life that's kind of holding me back from something bigger, to be more successful, to start a ministry. And I keep doing this thing. It's not good. I'm going to quit it. He says start quitting something. Quit something small. Quit something big. Quit a job. Quit hanging out with a certain friend. And once you start doing those things, it'll free you up to be able to move on into your future, to allow your family to move on to a more successful future, into a more successful dream. As I was reading this book, this was back in the pandemic when it was released, and I remember I was sitting, we were quarantined in the backyard, and I'm sitting on a blanket reading it, and I felt like at the time as I'm reading this book, I was thinking, I don't know if I have any dreams. I don't think I have any. And I just kept thinking, like, I don't want to be an Olympian. I don't have any dreams. And it wasn't that I was depressed. I just didn't really have any dreams, especially during COVID. And at the end of the book, what Bob gets to is he has this idea. And his idea is this. His idea says, pick a landing spot. He uses the illustration of planes, and he says, if you're a pilot, if you're on a plane, you have a landing spot. You have a destination. Your pilot clearly knows the landing spot and the landing strip, and it's a very specific spot. And he says, for you, what's your landing spot? Because if you don't know, pick one. Pick a couple landing spots. Get really specific. When we go back to Joseph's story and we think about Joseph, what were his? Egypt, Israel. They were really, really specific landing spots that Joseph is given. Go there. Do this thing there. And so for me, as I was thinking about this and thinking about my dreams, I started thinking, I need some specific landing spots. I don't have any. So I was looking at them. I opened these up a couple of weeks ago as we were getting ready for this sermon, and I started looking at I wrote down about 10. I started looking at the 10 that I wrote down, and I think 3 years ago I wouldn't have read these aloud, but now I want to read them aloud. So I'm going to get really vulnerable and read my landing spots. These are the dream landing spots that I wrote down. Number 1, I wrote down 200 kids at a worship night. Number 2, a missions trip to the Amazon. Not the warehouse across the street. Host a night to shine with Tim Tebow. Look it up. Start a PhD in theology. Take 77 people on a trip. Write 3 books. Climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Open a youth center in Malawi, Africa. Open a youth center in Chandler, Arizona. Be a great husband and father. I was looking back at these, and we didn't have 200 kids at a worship night. We had over 250 kids at a worship night just the next fall sitting right here who we fed tacos to. It was pretty cool. I started a PhD in theology. I didn't go on an Amazon missions trip, but if anyone wants to go, let's start signups and figure out how. I'd love to start doing Night to Shine with Tim Tebow if someone wants to introduce us to him. I outlined a few books. I climbed Santan Mountain, and I'm preparing for Mount Kilimanjaro. I didn't open a youth center in Chandler, Arizona, but a bunch of you helped me remodel the youth room here at the Grove. And I'd still like to open a youth center in Malawi, Africa with some of your help. And I try every day to be a good husband and a good father, and I fail, and I fail. And if we do a fifth point, we'll be here too long. But I fail all the time. And that's part of dreaming, is failure, and that's in the book. And as we step out, we start to fail. But we have to dream, don't we? You have to dream of being a good wife and a good husband and a good father, and you have to dream of these things. And so when I wrote down these dreams, I was dreaming what could be possible, what is unexpected. And I wrote down, take 77 people on a trip. And at the time, that seemed impossible because we were in COVID. And 2 weeks ago, we got to Compton and we got to the church, and we realized we didn't take 77 kids on a trip. We took about 84 people on our trip. It was the biggest trip we'd done. Yeah, it was so cool to see. And so we're on that trip, and it's cool to see that God, once he says, you're going to accomplish this dream, but I also have a lot more inside the dream to show you because you're just opening up the box, and here's what you're going to see. And so a bunch of kids that are in the room started to say, hey, can I get baptized? Hey, can I get baptized? Hey, can I? And we were like, wow, we forgot about baptisms, but sure. So we went to Huntington Beach, and we ended up baptizing, Matt Shively and I, over 17 kids that afternoon. And we were blown away. And we were just like, wow, God, you had all this stuff. And so they're changing, they're all soaking wet. We walk over to Wahoo's Fish Tacos, and we took it over. We looked like a cult or something walking in, and every family wanted Wahoo's, and they're like, oh, they can't get it. One family is waiting outside, and our kids started like pushing them up to the front. And the family said, where are you from? And they said, we're from the Grove, Arizona. And they said, wow, we're from the Grove, Orange County. That's weird. And then they started asking about Compton, and then the kids started telling them, and they started telling them everything that they did, and the family's blown away, and the family starts walking up to the front, and the dad, he said to Erica, our youth director, he said, hey, I want to pay for everybody's meal. She said, the bill is way too much. Look at it. And he said, no, I want to bless you guys. And he snuck his credit card in before anyone could say anything. And he said, we know youth ministry can be overwhelming. We know it's a lot. And if this is something small that we can do to bless your youth ministry and your youth workers, then that's what we want to do. And my challenge to all of you is this. Start dreaming big. Start picking some almost unrealistic, unexpectable, God-sized, extraordinary landing spots, but very specific landing spots, and write them down. Like Josh's mom, write them down in the back of your Bible so that in 10 years you can look back and just be blown away at what God is doing. Write them down in your phone like I did so that in 4 years you can look back and go, wow, check, 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 check. Get specific with it so that you can really go, yes, we do have 2 dogs. Yes, we did start a ministry to these people. Yes, yes, yes. Because when you start to get specific and you're willing to not stay stuck in the past, you're going to be blown away, I promise you. I firsthand experience at what God is about to do, and he's going to open something up and say, look, I have all this stuff planned for you. All these people are going to come alongside you and financially support you, so don't be scared. Let's go ahead and pray. God, we thank you for being a God of dreams. We thank you for giving us children who have dreams, who have young men who have dreams, and giving us those children who have dreams. I pray you fill our children at this church with God-sized dreams, that we become parents, God, who just foster the dreams of our children, not crush the dreams, but support their dreams. I pray that we financially come around the church with these dreams, God. I pray that for everyone in this room who has a dream that you've put inside of them, that these dreams start to become a reality as they start to step into it in this next season. It's in Jesus' name we pray over all these dreams. Amen.